My name is Emmy Amarati. I'm Assistant Director of our ACU Online Writing Center. Tomorrow, we will send out links to the recording and the slide deck for this webinar, and the links to the resources in the slide deck will be active. But you're also welcome to email me directly if you'd like a copy of the APA course paper template that we're going to use later in the webinar. And of course, during the presentation, please feel free to type any questions into the chat. And I or my colleague Basil, who has showed up to support us tonight, will be happy to do our best to answer them. So, as Basil said a few minutes ago, the focus of this webinar is writing about strategies. We have several learning objectives. By the end of the session, we will have used ITO 620's Week 4 Assignment 1, Defense in Depth, to understand how to prepare to write about organizational strategies, organize and develop a draft, and locate appropriate resources and cite in APA format. So let's begin by focusing on Learning Objective 1, Prepare to write about organizational strategies. To prepare to write about organizational strategies, we first need to understand what an organizational strategy is. An organizational strategy is a plan or framework for how an organization achieves a goal. Most often, this goal is driven by a challenge, a problem, or an opportunity. Since the strategy is grounded in a goal, the first thing we need to do to write about the strategy is define the goal. What does the organization need or want to do? And once we define the goal, we can isolate the strategy. Through analysis of the organizational context and some research, we can determine the answers to questions like these. What steps or stages should comprise the framework? What tools are available for each step or stage? And what is the best tool or technique available? For our writing context today, we're actually looking at a specific type of organizational strategy, organizational security strategies. Organizational security strategy encompasses structures that organizations put in place to protect their data and digital assets. So, if we consider the sequence of analysis that we just talked about, our general goal is already defined here. We need a strategy to protect the organization's data and digital assets. This means we can proceed to the next questions. What steps or stages should comprise the framework? What tools are available for each step or stage? And what is the best tool or technique available? I'm going to give you an unofficial example. When one of my children was younger, they were pretty curious and spunky, so I definitely didn't want them getting into my work email account and sending random happy faces to people. Just because we give a verbal notice that something's off limits, it doesn't mean that a curious person like my child will control their impulses and keep out. It is just too important to send random smiley faces to people that mom talks to all day. So since this technology has become available, my work email has a multi-layered security system attached to it. My laptop has a password, my email account has a password, and my email account has multi-factor authentication where I have to send a link to my phone, click the link to respond, nowadays enter a numerical code, and use my fingerprint to verify it. That is a whole lot of security to keep out curious little fingers, but keep in mind that also keeps out somebody with more nefarious intent than my little happy-faced bandit. And this applies directly to what we will be doing in the assignment of the day. For the rest of our webinar, we'll be applying this sort of analysis and application to ITO 620, Information Assurance and Control, Week 4, Assignment 1, Defense in Depth. As I mentioned, when you access the PowerPoint, this link will be live. So we're going to read through the assignment to understand what we need to do. First off, the purpose of the assignment is to allow you an opportunity to consider various tools and technologies that may be applied to defend an organization's networks and digital assets. In preparation, they've shared this paragraph. There are numerous technologies that organizations utilize to protect their networks, devices, and digital assets. Security professionals must have an understanding of the potential threats that an organization may face, but they also must be familiar with the tools and technologies that may be applied to defend against them. Architects carefully select which ones to apply, depending on their budget and their unique situations. Now begins the instructions. The assignment is to write a minimum 5-page paper in which you address the following. The term defense in depth is often used to describe a main approach to information security. What is meant by defense in depth? Provide examples and a sample implementation. Hint, I just gave you a very small illustration of defense in depth, talking about how I defend my email from my smiley face bandit child. The next question is organize and describe the technologies that are utilized to protect digital assets. How do they work together to support this concept, meaning of defense in depth? And finally, they'd like you to identify one tool, technique, or technology that you determine can best provide the security necessary to protect these assets. After you identify it, describe the technology and tell why it may provide sufficient protection. Final notes for submission. Your paper must be a minimum of 5 pages in length. Note that the title page and the reference page are in addition to the 5 pages of written work, so your entire document should end up being at least 7 pages. Proper in-text citations and a references page in APA format are to be included, and you must include at least 3 references in addition to the materials from your textbook. So this means we will have a minimum of 4 references. This is our assignment rubric that shows you how they're going to score the paper. You get 1 point for defense in depth being defined and described, example and sample implementation included. That's the first question. Next, 1 point for technologies utilized to protect digital assets are organized and described. Second question. How do the technologies work together to support this concept? Next, identify one tool, technique, or technology to best protect your assets. Last, describe the technology and why it may provide sufficient protection. I wanted to show you the rubric in particular because all of that is 5 points, but you're getting 5 points, which is half the grade, for this last criterion. The paper must be 5 pages, be formatted based on APA guidelines, and include your in-text citations and a reference page. So that means we need to take care to attend to the length requirement and your APA formatting guidelines. The next thing we're going to talk about is learning objective 2, organize and develop the draft. On this slide, I've pasted the questions from the assignment that we just read through. Then I asked myself which ones seem to go together. This way, we can determine the major sections of our paper. To me, the first question seems to create a section on its own. What is meant by defense in depth? Provide examples and a sample implementation. The next 2 questions relate to organizing and describing different techniques to support defense in depth, so they can create a second section. And then for the third section, the last 2 questions are about the tool, technique, or technology. Since those are related, we can also group them together. And then we have, how do these groupings that we've just created work together to help us create our major headings? Headings are a significant feature of APA format because they help chunk a paper into manageable sections, and they also act as signposts to help guide the reader through your discussion. To create headings, you can read the questions and then kind of sum them up in a short phrase that incorporates key words from the question or sums up the overall point. So, for instance, the first question was, what is meant by defense in depth? Provide examples and a sample implementation. So I've summed that up as the heading defense in depth. The next questions are about organizing and describing the technologies used to protect digital assets and tell how they work together. A way to sum this up would be technologies to protect digital assets. The third one is about the best tool, technique, or technology to provide this security. So it says one tool, one technique, or one technology. I probably wouldn't write most effective tool, technique, or technology as my heading. I would pick one word that applies best to the solution that I chose. In my example, I just wrote most effective technology, especially because the last question here refers to technology. Now that we have created our headings, we can see what they look like in the larger setting of APA format. To set up your drafts, I do encourage you to try out our ACU APA course paper template, which is linked here and will be accessible in the slideshow. The template has all our APA settings pre-formatted. I'll also provide you a link to the template again later in the presentation. So right now, I'm going to stop sharing my PowerPoint, and can everyone see the template for defense in depth?
Yes, thank you.
Yes, thanks. So on our first page of our template, we have the title page. You will need this to meet your assignment requirements. Remember, you're getting 5 points for length and APA formatting. So we have the title of the paper, which I just put the title of the assignment. Week 4, Assignment 1, Defense in Depth. We have the student's name, the school to which you belong, your university, the name of the course, the name of your instructor, and the due date for the paper. On the next page, we have the actual body of the paper. You'll notice that at the beginning, we need to repeat the title. We don't put a separate heading for the introduction. We just put the introductory paragraph right under the title. Next, you can see I've pasted the major headings that we talked about earlier. I've got defense in depth, technologies to protect digital assets, and most effective technology. Beneath each heading, I've gone ahead and pasted the relevant questions from the assignment. So under defense in depth, I have what is meant by defense in depth, provide examples, and provide a sample implementation. And this way I know exactly what I need to discuss under each heading in the body of the paper. At the bottom, I do have a conclusion paragraph, and I do have a separate major heading for the conclusion. So now that the paper's laid out, let's use this to start developing a response. As you may have noticed, I put the questions in the same order as they were given in the assignment. And one strategy to start writing is to simply rewrite these questions as sentence starters. So, what is meant by defense in depth? I could replace that with defense in depth means or is defined as, and then I can tell what it means. It would be a great place to use one of my sources. I could cite them here. We'll talk about citing in APA format in just a few minutes. Then the next question is to provide examples. After I define what defense in depth is in a few sentences, I could say examples of defense in depth include. I could list some examples here, and then I could go through and explain what each example is. The last question here is to provide a sample implementation. I can also turn that into a sentence starter if it helps me get writing. A sample implementation of defense in depth involves, if I were talking about protecting my email, my work email from my child, I could say a sample implementation of defense in depth involves keeping the organization's work email safe from attackers. And then I could explain the different layers of the sample implementation in the rest of that paragraph. So let's try practicing. Let's look at the third question, the third heading rather. It says, identify one tool, technique, or technology that you determine can best provide the security necessary to protect these assets. In our chat, what kind of sentence starter could you turn that into? How could you restate that question into a sentence starter? I will also ask my friend Basil. Basil, how could you rewrite that into a sentence starter?
Sorry, which for the most effective technology?
Yes, identify one tool, technique, etc. How could you turn that into a
Well,
sentence to start your paragraph?
because this assignment requires using APA style for very strictly, but since there are so many points going to that, I think I want to make it very clear that I'm referring to the same thing that this prompt is asking. So whatever it is, I want to use the word tool, technique, or technology in there. So it's clear I'm responding to that exact thing. So I'm going to go ahead and type something in the chat really quick, and then I'll read it out.
Okay.
And so my starting sentence is, there are many tools available for internet security of online assets. So I'm making a claim that there's more than one out there. And then I know as a writer that I need to back up that claim and give at least one supporting example. And since it's asking me to identify one that is best for my organization, then I don't feel that I need to list a whole lot, so long as I can have something that will back up that claim. So if I have a source for it, then I would include the citation there, and I'll just add that again in the chat. And then I can build on that and identify the specific one. Let's say that I'm using, it's not actually used, so this is a good example. We used to use something called Secure ID, and so no one would be advocating this because the product is not on the market anymore. But if we're doing this 15 years ago, it was a very common way of securing stuff. So with that little acknowledgement that this is something with a time capsule, I'm going to use that in my next iteration of this.
I do remember Secure ID.
So keeping in mind that this is a topic sentence, I've elaborated as, there are many tools available for internet security of online assets, author date, so that will be where the source supporting that claim goes, of which Secure ID, parentheses, RSA, comma, N period, D period, is very suitable for our corporation's needs. And our corporation would be whatever the organization you are writing on behalf of or role playing as. And
Wonderful.
then I'll need to back that up with reasons why it is, so that there's a clear argument, not just take my word for it, but giving people a reason to believe me. And so in this case, I could cite how it is or was being used by the federal government. It was considered the gold standard, recommended by many authors. and also that our organization had used it successfully for many years and thwarted many hacking attempts where we found people trying to do password hacks and stuff and could get past the secure ID. So that would be a mix of uh, using published sources and also using the anecdote of my organization's experience. And for that I would need to be clear that that is where the information was coming from, with wording like, in my corporation's history, I have observed X. So it's clear that I'm describing my personal experience or professional experience.
Great. Thank you, Basil. I appreciate your starting to build in our discussion of using resources, because that's actually the next thing we are going to talk about. So you will notice, if you want to use this strategy of getting started with sentence starters, you can actually do a lot of laying things out without actually having gone into your resources yet. But as you build out your sentences, that is where, as Basil just did, you will start demonstrating how you have tied your research in. With respect to research, let me show you one more element of our template, which is our references page. I've set up the references using your textbook reference and the other required resources for the module. And notice that these references are listed alphabetically. So we have Buchanan, Ermine, Macmillan, and then Whitman. And the entries are formatted with what we call a hanging indent. That means that the first line, we'll look at Macmillan here. The first line is flush with the left margin, and the subsequent lines are indented. And now we are going to go back to our PowerPoint. Let me switch my screen one more time. And there we go. This again was the paper that we just looked at. So our learning objective 3 is locating appropriate resources and citing in APA format. We are going to go back to the assignment instructions briefly and remind you that it says you need at least 3 references in addition to materials from your textbook. That means the textbook is 1. The 3 others added to that make a minimum of 4. We're going to start with your textbook. Here is our reference for a book in APA format. I have the author's names, which are Whitman, their first and middle initial, and Mattered, HJ. I have the year of publication for the book in parentheses. Then I have the book title in italics. I have the edition number in parentheses, and then I have the publisher name. One thing to keep in mind with books is that we use sentence case to format the titles. This means that instead of capitalizing all major words, as we do in other cases, we only capitalize the first word of the title and the subtitle and any proper nouns. So for this title, only the first word, principles, is capitalized. Now that we have the reference, we also know how to cite. Basil and I started discussing that when we were looking at the paper. So APA uses citations in author date format. This means that for a paraphrase, which is information we write in our own words, we can put the author's name and the year in parentheses, separated by a comma. We call this a parenthetical citation. That's Whitman and Mattered, comma, 2018. Another way to cite is to name the authors in your sentence and put the year after their names in parentheses. So Whitman and Mattered, 2018, described. We call this a narrative citation. In this situation, since we're writing in APA format, always be sure to use a past tense verb, like I have described here to tell what the authors have done, said, or found in the past. Another thing to note, since we're citing two authors with your textbook, is that we format the "and" between their names differently depending on how you write the citation. If you're writing their names in the parenthetical citation, you will use the "and" symbol, which we call an ampersand. If you're writing the names out in your sentence, we're going to actually write out the word A and D. The other required and recommended readings from the week are listed here. We have a book by Buchanan called Cryptography and a book by Ermine called Knowledge Management, The Creative Loop. We're following the same format that we use for your textbook to write these references. We put the author's name, the year, the title of the book, and the publisher. In this case, the Ermine source, Knowledge Management, The Creative Loop, has a title and a subtitle, so we get the opportunity to see what sentence case looks like with a subtitle. Notice that we capitalize the K, which is the first word of the title, and the T, which is the first word of the subtitle. These texts also give us the opportunity to see how to cite one author. As we saw in the last slide, we cite in APA format using the author and the year. Keep in mind too, that if you are writing a direct quote that you copied directly from the source, you need to add the locator information in APA format. Here, the locator information is a page number because books have pages. So I have Ermine 2018, page 56. All those elements are separated by commas. For the narrative citation, we can still put the author's name followed by the year in the earlier part of the sentence. And then at the end of the sentence, we'll just put the page number in parentheses after the direct quote. One of the other required resources for this week is a LinkedIn Learning video. On the slide, I've connected you directly to that video using a link that was provided to me by Dr. Feliciano. To write this reference in APA format, we'll need some elements that we did not use in the book references, because this time we're citing a lesson from an online course. First, we have the name of the account that published the video. In this case, it's going to be Macmillan, R, period. We put the year and then the month and day for this because they have a more specific date provided, and that's required when we're citing web resources like videos. Next, we have the title of the video, which is Intrusion Prevention and Detection. After that, we put the word video in square brackets, starting with a capital V. Then we put the name of the course in Cisco Secure Firewall. Then we put the site that published it, LinkedIn Learning, and after that, we put the URL. For a lesson from an online course, the video name and the course name are both in sentence case. This looks odd here, but let me explain why. Remember, sentence case means that only the first word of the title and the subtitle and proper nouns are capitalized. So we've got intrusion prevention and detection. Only the first word is capitalized here, intrusion. So why do we have Cisco Secure Firewall in all capital letters if that's supposed to be in sentence case? Basil, what do you think?
Well, when it comes to something that is a proper noun, which I believe Cisco Secure Firewall is a trademarked name,
Absolutely.
then we would keep it in title case.
You are correct. So, as he just said, Cisco Secure Firewall is copyrighted or patented or trademarked or something like that. So it is a proper noun and we need to keep it capitalized. So to cite this source, we are still going to use our author date format. We will put Macmillan, 2023 if we're paraphrasing. And if we want to directly quote Macmillan, as I've done in the second example, we actually don't have a page number It's a video, so we're going to use a timestamp. A timestamp shows when the quote begins in the video, and this notation here shows that the quote begins at 1 minute and 8 seconds. So we have reviewed how to format for sources, but if you find that you want to add a little bit other information, you want to do some research on your own, I did want to show you how to work with our ACU online library. We have a section in the library devoted to information technology and computing, and that page can be found through this URL, which will be clickable in the slide pack for this show. If you click the link, you're going to find a page that looks like this. Information technology and computing start here. They have everything set up for you. If you'd like, you can do a one search, which will search everything in our library collection. In the middle here, for instance, you could type defense in depth in that field and hit search, and it will bring back all the resources available to you. I would like to show you in particular how to search our online databases in a way that may be helpful in this and future assignments. So at the top, it says online databases. If we click that, we're going to go to a page like this where different databases specific to the area of information and technology are listed. You'll be able to click one database, and then you'll be given the option to select multiple databases to search, which can help you find a broader range of texts or texts that are better, more specifically related to what you're writing about. So if you click a database, it will take you to a search page like this. I've got defense in depth written in the search box. But I wanted to also show you that you can choose options to limit your search to help you find the most helpful articles. So in the lower left corner, we can click full text, which is super important if you're at home researching. You want the full text to be available to you. You click that, it will bring back only articles that are available for you to read on your computer. We can also select peer-reviewed. Peer-reviewed journals are considered the gold standard for research quality because it means that any information in there has been vetted by other experts in the field. The other thing I wanted to show you is that on the right with the arrow, you can set a date range for your search. You're writing about a very fast changing field, information technology and computing. So if you're looking for the most up-to-date research, your instructor may advise you to search for more recent articles. A good rule of thumb would be 3 to 5 years of age. Now, if you're looking up stuff about the history of information technology and computing, of course, going back to older articles would be just fine. If you're looking for basic information on the history. But if you want to find something that is being in use now or being studied now, using a more recent date for the start year would probably be advisable. I put in 2019 here, that's 5 years. And when I did this search, this is what came back. I got 2,882 hits. Obviously, not all of these sources are going to be relevant to what we're writing about, and you would need to scan through the results to determine which are. If you don't find anything that's relevant, because sometimes it'll bring back things that aren't directly related, you can change your database keywords that you're searching. You can try a different database, or you can extend out that date range on the articles a little bit. When I did this search, the first 2 articles seemed pretty useful for writing this paper. So let me show you what an entry for one of them looks like. So on this page, we have the title of the article, they give you the authors, they tell you the source. We even have the keywords supplied by the author include defense in depth and cybersecurity, which is directly related to what we're doing. If you want to review the abstract, that will probably give you the best sense of whether something is applicable to what you're writing about. This one was talking about cyber attacks on industrial and power systems and using defense in depth in that context. So if that's something you want to consider as you're writing, it would be helpful. And if we decide it's a useful source, the database actually offers a really handy tool to help us write the reference for it. Over here on the right, under the Tools menu, you see Cite. And if you click on that, it's going to open a window that lists a variety of different references formatted according to different styles. So you need to make sure that you scroll down to the one that says APA 7th edition. Then you can just take that and paste it into your references list. I do have a hint for you about using references formatted by our database, or honestly, any references that you copy from any automatic reference generator. Fairly often the formatting is not exactly in tune with APA format, so you definitely want to check it against an accurate sample. So, Basil, what problem do you see with this reference for a journal article from our database?
Well, I see three things. Do you mind if I draw on the screen?
Go for it.
I may need you to promote me to co-host for me to do that.
Okay.
So the first thing that catches my eye is that we have some capitalization here that's in title case, and I don't believe that that's a proper noun.
Nope, definitely
So
not.
that should be lowercase. Uh, Another thing, and this is a hard one to spot. If you compare these two commas here, you'll see that the one on the right is not italicized and the one on the left is. And this is a very common and mistake to make, especially if you are using a small screen, but that first comma should not be italicized because it's not part of the title. And that's one of the ways that we can easily see that the 8 is not part of the journal title, but that's the volume number. And then I also see a period at the end.
There
That
is a period at the end. Oh my gosh, I didn't even see that on my tiny screen. My goodness. Thank you, Basil. So I did make a note here that we need to edit article titles in our database references almost all the time to apply sentence case. That means that while they have all the major words capitalized, we would want to make only the first word capitalized because it's just a title. There's no subtitle. And as Basil said, cybersecurity and smart substations are not proper nouns. So we want to put the C, the S, and the other S into lowercase. So now that our reference is in APA format, we can review how to cite. This article has a bunch of authors. For works with 3 or more authors, we cite using the first author's last name and the phrase et al. Et al means and others. So here we have Desara, et al. Et al has a period after the all. Then we followed it with 2018 in parentheses after his name or their name. Next, we can also use the locator information, which in this case is a page number if we'd like to directly quote. So for our second example, there's a direct quote, and I have Jazara et al., period, comma 2018, comma, page 4425. And the period goes after the closing parentheses for the citation. Today, we used ITO 620's Week 4 Assignment 1 Defense in Depth to understand how to write about organizational strategies, organize and develop a draft, and locate appropriate resources and cite in APA format. I noticed that someone requested my email, which Basil has already pasted down. Thank you so much. And you can also, as Basil noted, you can email our entire Writing Center team at onlinewritingcenter@acu.edu. I think Basil has raised his hand. Yes, Basil.
Yes, I mean, for this assignment, as you pointed out, there's a lot of the points that goes into, how polished this paper is, general style, grammar, APA. And where would you recommend that I go to get feedback on just polish and APA?
Well, you can visit us at our writing center, which I have all kinds of lovely information about at the end of our webinar slide deck. So you can check out our online writing center homepage in my ACU. We have a video that outlines all the steps you need to make an appointment and submit a paper. We will work with you at any stage of your writing, and we do offer two types of appointments. The first appointment is an asynchronous appointment. That means you upload your paper and we send you feedback by email in 24 hours. That will have a title of something like Writing Center Report, so that's what you would be looking for. We also have real-time phone or Zoom appointments. If you go to the schedule at the time of your appointment, you click on your Zoom link, and you can actually see us, talk to us, and have any questions answered in real time. Note that all these appointments are in Central Time because that's the time zone that the university functions in. You can also access many writing-related resources on our online writing center website. As we just mentioned, our online writing center submission process has two stages. You can schedule an appointment at WC Online and then submit your paper to this week's Canvas box. Our contact information is our email. I think Basil gave it to you earlier, onlinewritingcenter@acu.edu. This next link lets you schedule an appointment. And this is another link to our online writing center website. Here are some other resources. This is the link again to the APA course paper template, not the version that I used in the video, but our general version that you can use for any paper in your program if you have APA as a requirement. We do have a YouTube channel with a bunch of very exciting videos, and we have our online writing center blog with blog posts on various topics. Other webinars are also available on our website and our YouTube channel. Here, I've linked you to our most recent version of our Introduction to APA 7th edition. You can access the slides and the video for that. I've also linked you to APA 7 citing online videos in case there are other videos, maybe TED Talks or something that you're interested in citing for this assignment. And that brings us to the end of our webinar.